Hello, my friends. Okay, so now question is why some people are gaining weight and some people don't. We may have a meal, various people around the table, and usually the skinnier one packs it up the most. So how come that some people gain weight and some people eat large quantities of food and remain skinny? We are being told, oh, they have a faster metabolism, and this is why they don't gain weight, or hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, whatever thing we get into it. Yes, there is a hormonal influence there, but number one, it is completely different situation. We get fat because we accumulate fat. To be able to accumulate fat, we have to, number one, produce it. It is not that you eat fatty food and you store the fat. It all depends on how genetically your metabolism is situated. If we are running properly on fat, we have plenty mitochondria running, and your cells are using basically the triglyceride and turn it into your energy. Now, most people, I would say great majority, probably 99% of people worldwide are glucoholics in various stages, which means they have reprogrammed their bodies to use glucose, sugar, as energy source. Now, cells will not absorb sugar from the blood because it's there to use it for energy. They have to be forced to do it. And this is why body uses insulin to force cells to absorb glucose. Now I explained that this is done for the emergency situations when life is in danger, to have extra power. But once when we start saturating the blood with the glucose, then the body does not want to waste it, just urinate it out, because it is programmed to use it. And we normally do not have increase of blood sugar unless we are in a stress, when liver turns glycogen into glucose, liberates the glucose from glycogen, and pushes it into the blood. So this is how animals in nature increase the sugar, blood sugar level. And this is what should be happening with us. But we have been fooled, duped into eating carbohydrates, where you free the glucose from the cellulose by heating it up or processing it. And now the glucose gets absorbed, and when it finds itself in the blood, the body is an electronic robot. It's all about sensors, switches, and programs. So blood sugar rises. It doesn't matter where the sugar came from. Did it come from liver, or it came through absorption through the intestines? Once when it is in the blood, it's sensed, increased level triggers insulin production, putting it in the blood, and forces cellular absorption, and now cells are like in a stress mode and taking the sugar, turning it into energy. We are being told that this is how normally body works. Yeah, in a stress situation. And then under us, poisoning it with starches. So once when it absorbs the sugar, some of it can use for immediate energy, and what it can't, it cannot store. So liver transforms it into fat. If the transformation into fat, if there's a plenty of sugar coming in, then liver may be transforming so much sugar into fat that it does not have time to push it into blood circulation as a triglyceride to be stored in a fatty tissue, but some of it lingers in the liver and we get fatty liver. It's not a disease. It is basically influenced with too much of blood sugar. Now, why do some people have high jumps in the blood sugar and some don't? Well, I have explained that sugar, glucose, or even fructose will not be absorbed from the intestines into the blood without transporting mechanism. So, which is a protein we call GLUT. So more GLUT we have, the more sugar we are going to absorb. Now, what creates increase in GLUT? Necessity. Availability of sugar, more sugar in the blood, more insulin has to be produced, switches are now triggered, and calibration sets in on genetic level. Basically, more sugar, well, we need more transporters. So we can use less insulin. And body starts producing more GLUT. More GLUT it produces so it can manage the sugar. More sugar it will absorb when it finds itself in our intestines. So some people have a low level of GLUT. They cannot absorb much of glucose. So they can munch on bread and all the stuff, and they don't really increase the blood level of glucose that much that body will have problem to store it, and because more sugar is being transformed into fat, and this means that more sugar is readily available, which means the cells are getting more and more adjusted to sugar, disengaging mitochondria. So you have less mitochondria working in a cell. And now you are dependent on this glucose because there is no way that you can produce enough energy from fat with this amount of mitochondria. Now, what causes the increase of GLUT? Availability of glucose. More often the glucose is surging into our body, the GLUT is rising and staying there. So what happens? People that are fat and have problem with obesity are mostly people that snack a lot. So it's not that you have only one meal, because what happens if you have, let's say, one meal and you eat carbohydrates, nothing but carbohydrates, vegetarian, but you have only one meal a day. Well, you absorb this sugar. It immediately goes into production of energy in the cell. But again, I said it's a small amount that can be immediately used. And the rest that was absorbed is transferred by liver into fat and stored. But now you are not eating for 12 hours, 16 hours. So body cannot really disengage too many mitochondria. It has to keep them running because you still are producing now energy using fat, even though most of the fat was created by liver transmutating sugar into fat. So this way, if you are eating once or twice a day, even 3 times, but you don't snack in between, then you have these surges of sugar, which happens only 3 times a day, or once or twice a day. So the GLUT level jumps, but it does not really go high. it stays on the lower levels. It takes a long time before slowly you start increasing the GLUT level and absorption. And this is why it takes many years before you develop diabetes. Diabetes means that you have a lot of GLUT and you just absorb a lot of sugar from your intestines. Not only glucose, any sugar. You will absorb fructose a lot more than normally you would. So, people that are obese usually snack a lot. And you don't have to snack, I would not say a lot, often. It's a better term. Because you have certain limit of GLUT. So you have a big meal, you take a lot of potato, a lot of pasta, but you have a relatively small amount of GLUT. So relatively small amount of this sugar is going to be absorbed in one meal. And then you don't have meal for a long time. So sugar level in the blood drop. There is no more necessity for this GLUT. So you don't increase GLUT production. There is a small amount of GLUT that you need for cellular action to produce amino acids, and then they don't need insulin, they just send the GLUT, trap the sugar molecule, and bring it back into the cell. So no much insulin is being shot. So you're more or less, you can kind of function better, and you are not going to be gaining much weight because you still have reasonable amount of mitochondria running, so you can take this prolonged periods without feeding yourself. And if you can take it, if you are okay by eating only 3 meals a day without snacking in between, or better yet 2 or 1 meal a day, then you are forcing your genetics to stay more or less in line because you don't have that much problem with sugar, only once a day or twice a day. Spurts, like being in a life-threatening situation for half an hour while you are eating. Every day, once a day, twice a day. Body can again adjust to it better than when you start snacking. Little piece. Little, I don't know, a little piece of bread here, a little piece of chocolate there. As you go by, a little cracker. And so you are not eating big amounts, but a constant supply, frequent supply. So now you have frequent jumps in blood sugar, so the necessity of more GLUT is present way longer and more often, and your GLUT levels are rising, which means your absorption of sugar is rising, which means you create more fat because you you can use only certain amount for energy in the moment when you are eating, and the rest you are going to be turning into fat. Now, since you have a frequent supply of sugar, of glucose, because you are snacking, now you are raising voltage, you are producing electricity from glucose many times a day. So you are well charged, you are energetic, you can do stuff, but you are shutting mitochondria because now you need less and less mitochondria because you have more or less steady supply of sugar during the day. During the night is another story, and this is where you go with the sleep apneas and frequently waking up hungry and going to the refrigerator. This is consequence, because at night you are not snacking, and you have very few mitochondria now running, so your body really cannot fix itself and replenish energy during the sleep. So when we are talking about why some people can eat, well, those people who eat a big meal and don't get fat, well, they are not snacking. They are usually busy during the day. They don't think about food. They're focused on what they are doing. No other source of food coming in until meal comes. Of course, they are forced genetically to maintain more mitochondria active so they can actually utilize fat better. So they are using their fat that they are storing, and they don't get fat. They don't have problem with fatty liver. But still, they are not going to have production of GCMF because they are still using daily glucose, so they need a supply of hydrolase, glycosyl hydrolase, nagalase. And when body produces nagalase, it cannot produce GCMF because the same pair of genes is involved in one or the other depending on frequency. And yeah, if you are only eating one meal a day, you can reasonably maintain some GCMF production. Not nearly as good as if you cut completely glucose off. Again, I have no means of measuring the GCMF content in the blood of people who eat only one meal a day, being it carbohydrates, and those who eat frequently. So this is just my estimation. I know that to really have a good production of GCMF and be immune to blood poisonings from wounds and stuff, you have to be absent of glucose. You cannot have any of it. But this motion that nutritionists repeat, it's your thyroid gland and it's your cellular activity and cellular digestion that is different in other people, so some get fat, some don't. It's a bollocks. It has nothing to do with it because everybody, even the most obese person, can slim down, trim down if they change the diet. Not starvation, but if you go into eating once a day, of course for you it is going to be starvation because you don't have enough mitochondria, so it will take some period of time to adjust to this. And we find a freedom of stress. You see, stress is very energy hungry. So once when you raise energy, this is why whenever you are stressed, whenever you are in fear, then you are hungry later on. Because you have to replenish the energy you have lost through fear. Fear draws it out. Fear, thinking of what could happen, or what you are afraid of, and all this is you are broadcasting. So it's very much energy consuming. We have to start thinking rationally, but also using the truthful information, not the schooled, indoctrinated lies we were forced to absorb and to acknowledge and repeat. So if you have a problem with weight and you don't want to give up carbohydrates, well, stop munching in between meals, number one. And then start cutting the number of meals you have during the day. From 3, first stop snacking, then eliminate breakfast. Or better yet, eliminate the dinner. And then eliminate breakfast. And stay with one meal sometime during the day between 2 and 6 o'clock. And you will start feeling the weight loss because now you are activating more mitochondria, you are producing less GLUT, so your sugar absorption is coming down. So most of the sugar that you eat in a big meal ends up being in your colon, ferments, and gives you soft stool because it inflames the intestine. colon. And since you absorb small amount of sugar, then you create less fat, and you have to keep higher number of mitochondria running because now you are fat dependent as well as glucose dependent. Again, the best is cutting glucose completely out, and this way you run properly on fat. You don't overproduce fat ever, and whatever you produce, and if you store some, well, you will be using it while you are working. So the weight fluctuates, but basically you never get obese. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Love you all.